If you enjoy this video, smash the like button. Hit the like button and subscribe. I appreciate it. Good day. You are watching Philip Maleka's Consciousness Evolution. I'm Philip Maleka. Today's column is entitled Aliens Part 3, Interdimensional Contact with Ourselves. After taking some time to reacquaint myself with the current state of ufology, the proponents and detractors, the videos, the reporting, the facts, the claims, the perspectives, and then offering myself my own unofficial information, I am back to lend a decidedly different viewpoint of what I believe this phenomena is and what it means to mankind, especially in light of our current time frame within the shift of consciousness. In order to understand what this phenomena is requires a certain level of background into, as I've said from the onset of my columns, a comprehension of who and what we actually are and what this world, this universe, this dimension actually is, and how it all fits into the larger story of what we might call creation. It is not creation by a benevolent God, though there is an element of a great creative energy, source of energy that we cannot conceive of, and yet are a part of. We weren't placed here by God 12,000 years ago, nor were we the result of primordial goo and random, chaotic, accidental scientific formation. None of it is what we think it is, as we have been taught or led to believe, or even what our senses indicate to us. The sheer enormity and magnitude of our history almost precludes me from being able to offer a clear picture to the reader, because each piece builds on the last and requires an openness on the part of the reader to be able to allow for new information during each step of the process. That information will mostly be conflictual with long-held beliefs regarding our origins and actual history, as opposed to the conclusions of scientific theories based on the cobbling together and evaluation of so-called scientific facts that may or may not be true or accurate. I have nothing against science unless it limits us from considering new information that may conflict with long-standing beliefs. We really don't know what our origin is, and we don't understand who we are. On top of all that, we have also entered into a master source event termed the shift in consciousness, in which mankind is embarking on a trajectory that will bring us in touch with all the aspects of ourselves, both physical and non-physical. This is the remembrance, and that is, as it turns out, the actual source of these contact events and sightings. I understand that what I am going to share with my readers may sound religious, cultish, more made-up stories or fables devoid of scientific proofs to impress the impressionable and gullible with the intent to mislead or deceive or to capture the imagination of those who may be looking for easy answers to unknown phenomena. This is not my intent, nor is what I will share some Harry Potterish flight of fancy. I invite my readers to temporarily suspend disbelief and imagine, if you will, that perhaps what I'm about to tell you is actually not only feasible and reasonable, but quite likely. What I will do at this point is offer my solution, a spoiler of sorts, so that the reader may keep this in mind as I work my way through my explanations. That solution is that in all of these true cases of UFOs, UAPs, sightings, contacts, spaceships and tic-tacs and cubes and grays and orbs, the beings we are encountering are ourselves. Not ourselves in terms of our present physical expression, these bodies we are expressing here and now, but ourselves in terms of other aspects of ourselves. emanating from our essence, our oversoul, other dimensional versions of us. Bearing this in mind will help alliterate an overall purpose to these events and assist us in understanding why this is happening in such great numbers in this present day. This is not to say that this phenomenon is not being exploited and or mimicked by authorities and governments for their own purposes. We can clearly see that it is. But just because any of these events may be exploited or misinterpreted does not mean that they didn't happen or are not real. Not all of them are really aliens. But for the ones that fall outside of the range of man-made or hoaxes, that truly are not explainable in scientific or physical terms, of which there are a verifiable number, in every case it is other dimensional versions of us, or beings who occupy different areas of consciousness in assistance to us. Now, before I apologize for how crazy this sounds, let me just say that this is certainly not any crazier than ETs flying for eons across our galaxy to torment us by zipping around our skies without regard for our known physics. And if you follow my explanation to the end, you will find that it is all not only conceivable, but quite feasible as an answer to these unrecognized interactions. Occam's razor in this case, it is far more likely that all of these events involve beings that are already here and always have been, and that we just simply have been unaware of them than it is that beings traveled impossibly long distances to visit us. Just because we haven't, to this point, been able to perceive other beings in our world does not mean that they don't exist. Just because we can only theorize but not recognize with our senses other dimensions does not mean they don't exist. Enter the shift in consciousness. Humanity evolving in self-awareness to the point that we are becoming aware of things that we were not aware of before. As an example, 2 centuries ago, someone viewing a 350-ton Boeing Airbus flying through the sky would most certainly think they had lost their minds and were viewing something otherworldly and or impossible. So consider that this is just the beginning of something that will be common in our future. Viewing and interacting with other dimensional beings has begun. Not just any other dimensional beings, other dimensional us's. And it is all related to the shift and the remembrance. So now let me do my Columbo. I've told you the ending, and let's just see how we get there. Let's go back to the beginning and allow me to briefly outline what humanity is and how we came about to our current position. For purposes of brevity, I will outline various steps along the way. Each of those steps could easily consume volumes of background. I will do my best to offer the information clearly and without distortion, but because of the inherent nature of physical versus non-physical, distortion is unavoidable. In future columns, I will very likely be delving into these subjects in more depth, but for our purposes here, I must depend on the reader to allow for each step without that detail and accounting for translation into physical terms. 1. The great creative force. Call it God, call it source, call it the universe. It is that which binds us all and all of creation. From this source there are unlimited components of which we are all one, interconnected and inseparable. And yet, of these interconnected components, there are aspects that we term consciousness. Within consciousness, certain components wished to be exploring and expressing their uniqueness. We are those components. 2. We devised a plan of sorts that would allow us to do so, to explore separation and individuality by creating physical environments. These physical environments would create a template through which we could explore the ideas of individuality by manifesting physically as unique and separate beings. 3. Great experimentation then followed in developing these physical environments and continues in the ever-present now. Note, consciousness is always in a state of becoming. Time references are in our terms, but in reality there is no before, after, or during. It is all now, as time in non-physical, our natural state, is simultaneous. There is a great cooperation within consciousness in which all of it had to be created down to the most minute detail. And it didn't only include our current physical dimension, but also infinite other dimensions with varying properties besides this one that we recognize as our own. So if one considers all the minutiae that had to be considered and tested, so to speak, this was an unbelievably complex undertaking. Time, space, gravity, planets, animals, nature, emotions, sexuality, all of these things had to be developed into a working model. 3a. This was accomplished by aspects of consciousness that we will call the dreamwalkers. These are beings that have existed outside of our time-space throughout the entirety of our earthly history. They are not our gods, but they are aspects of consciousness which chose to take this position of creation and continued assistance. They completely manifested once in our past, but remain as non-physical partners in our mutual creation of physical reality. They hold the remembrance for us. 4. One thing that was determined was that in order to have a pureness of experience as individual and separate beings, required a wiping of memory for those focuses who would undertake the finished product. Consider that consciousness within non-physical, our natural state, did not require anything that was not already provided and known. So provisions had to be incorporated in which there was a lifeline, a call a friend, a means to assist those who would undertake a somewhat dependent role of becoming physical without any prior experience and without any knowledge of their true nature. And there had to be someone in charge of the monopoly instructions, someone who knew the game and the rules and would keep the game flowing within its intended framework, someone who held the remembrance of who and what we are and why we are here. These were our dreamwalkers, some of whom then also took on physical manifestation, who we will refer to as the seers. These seers also undertook the wiping of memory, but maintained a spark vision of the truths of our existence so that they could remind the rest of us and not allow that ancient knowledge to be lost. Try to imagine the first generations of physically focused beings encountering a lion. Nice kitty kitty, chomp. Or perhaps a pleasant stroll along a mountain. Lo-de-do-de-do-de. Oops, one step too far. Ah! Back to the drawing board. Our early ancestors required assistance to assimilate to physical life, to understand how to navigate a physical environment. Early humans were not less intelligent or less able than ourselves. They just didn't have any reference. And in this, there were always helpers in the form of non-physical or partially physical beings to assist. In times past, when there were belief systems that incorporated angels, these helpers could be considered in such terms. They may have been considered gods or extraterrestrials by those who came into contact with them, though if inquiring of them, they would have denied any of these to be the case. They were helpers, and they were simply different aspects of consciousness holding of a wider awareness than the rest of us, but from the same pools that we are, and in many cases, other aspects of ourselves. Benevolent, loving beings from the same source as the rest of us. I haven't even begun to address to all of the nuances and detail involved with these concepts, but the reader should get the general idea that there have always been other aspects of us to remind and assist us, the completely amnesiac, of these greater truths. So now let's fast forward to today. We have now entered the third decade of the objective portion of the insertion of the Master Source event we refer to as the shift in consciousness. As I mentioned earlier, this is the remembrance. This is humanity returning to our ancient knowledge of our source. The ending of the amnesia. In this, we are widening our awareness and becoming cognizant once again of greater aspects of our existence and of ourselves within non-physical, as we were before engaging physical manifestation. Ourselves as essence, the non-physical energy from which these physical focuses emerge. So two things are occurring simultaneously. We are experiencing a burgeoning awareness that extends beyond our supposedly limited dimensions in physics. And secondly, there is accelerated help being provided by the Dreamwalkers to assist us with our remembering within the shift. Please note here, the shift is not happening in all dimensions. It is strictly happening in our dimension. This may not be relevant to this discussion, but it is an important detail nonetheless. In both cases, we are beginning to see, experience, and interact with other dimensional and non-physical beings. Now, granted, this has occurred throughout human history. However, there is an acceleration now of these types of occurrences based on the reasons above. As a result, we can see that these encounters are happening more frequently. Also, as a result of greater acceptance within the mass belief, we are no longer as limited in our perception of these events. We will not see what we do not believe is possible. We will dismiss such things. But just about everyone now understands what subspace is. Who would have guessed that it isn't that far from the truth? So it stands to reason that since our congressional hearings, the acceptance of the idea of non-human intelligence has been widely adopted within our mass beliefs. I would expect that now that it is socially acceptable to speak of such things, we will experience a massive groundswell of reported encounters and events as people feel more comfortable acknowledging and sharing these with those they come into contact with. A perfect storm, so to speak, of circumstances that lends itself to our acceptance of this new information, and a self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts, in which we allow ourselves wider awareness to be recognizing of these types of non-official interactions. This is what is occurring in all of our sightings. These are the beings we are coming in contact with. In all cases, it is us or other aspects of consciousness that are assisting us, either directly or indirectly, in our remembrance. To be clear, not all of these interdimensional contacts are aware of us or aware of our shift. They are often just as dumbfounded as we are as to our origin and identity. But this is a result of our unique ability within this dimension to be traversing of dimensions other than our own. We are often traveling to other dimensions in both our waking and dream states without realizing that we are. But within this dimension, what we are experiencing are bleed-throughs from other dimensions to our own. This is what we are viewing within our skies and otherwise. And doesn't it strike you as odd that in many of these sightings, besides being unaffected by our physics, that they also resemble something that's alive? The shape of them often is not quite discernible, and they appear to change shape before our eyes, or move in ways that suggest something that is sentient. All of these ideas can lead us to accept that what we are viewing is another type of consciousness, similar to us, but not the same, just from the same source, and embodying the same intent as us: exploration, other aspects of ourselves. I realize that all of this information likely begs more questions than answers, but I will briefly address to specific questions regarding our current collective disclosure and some of the reported facts about extraterrestrials, aliens, and spacecraft. Extraterrestrials would be beings within our dimension, but not of Earth origin. There do exist such beings in other worlds, but we are not currently, nor have we been recently, in contact with them. Aliens, then, would be non-human life that exists other dimensionally to our own. Remember here once again that all dimensions coexist within the same physical space. Therefore, we are literally elbow to elbow with other dimensional beings or aliens. And since the shift is allowing us interaction with all of our other focuses, both in this dimension and in other dimensions, we are becoming more aware of these other focuses of ourselves. There are and have been situations with actual physical remains of craft and occupants. Contrary to our popular belief, these beings are not particularly more technologically advanced than we are. They have simply found a way to pierce the veil between dimensions, which we do also, intentionally or not. And though they display properties and movements that seem to be in advance of our science and known physics, this is a result of the transformation they must undertake in order to move interdimensionally. What we witness is a translation of their true nature, their true form. We regard them as how they appear to us without consideration that their appearance is a reconfigured representation of their actual form and appearance. They are not of our dimension. Therefore, they do not completely conform to either our form or our physics. Also, what we are left with, say, in Roswell, would be artifacts of these actual beings and their crafts. In truth, these are more like ghost images, remains of the interdimensional event, but not the actual beings and craft which actually return or remain in their respective dimension. As such, these artifacts will disintegrate rapidly as the energy to maintain them is no longer there. The artifacts from Roswell are likely long gone. They may have dissipated shortly after discovery. We don't know for sure. And without transparency from our governments, we don't know what other such occurrences have transpired and what their current status is. But from the sounds of it, it seems like it has happened fairly frequently, and that we may be in possession of such objects. There is also evidence that private companies are or have been in possession of these artifacts, these alien artifacts. No doubt to reverse engineer the technology, not understanding that the technology itself is native to another dimension, and therefore is unlikely to operate within any known physical parameters within this dimension. These companies are very unlikely to be in favor of releasing information that they hold if they feel that they can gain an developmental advantage by keeping them secret. But with or without government and corporate cooperation, these events will continue and expand as the collective generates more acceptance and awareness of these as real. And our expanding ability to be aware of our multidimensionality and all of our other focuses in this and all dimensions ensures that this is going to be one long, strange trip as we begin interacting with all manners of our consciousness. I would say that our best work as humanity would be to begin to reevaluate these events, not from a standpoint of our government and defending ourselves, not from a standpoint of science attempting to explain these events within the confines of our current understanding of physics and reality, but as an admission and a surrender to the idea that we didn't and don't know everything we thought we did. That there is a massive glaring hole in our acceptance of consciousness, how it relates to us and what we are, and how it relates to our experience within this physical reality. We are more than we have previously believed. This physical reality is a camouflage of sorts that is a reflection of our non-physical reality and intent to experience individuality and separation within a physical system. We are much more expansive and much more powerful than we have ever imagined. The shift and the remembrance is driving massive changes to our perception and understanding of our true natures. I encourage my readers to leave your comments and your questions. I will answer as best I can, and I appreciate your interest. Things are going to be changing very rapidly. Buckle in. The ride has just begun. Thanks for taking part.